As a buyer, should you ask the seller to pay closing costs? This actually comes up quite a bit. It's really a point of negotiation. It's all about money. So when you're buying a home, there's of course an extraordinary amount of money involved. In addition to the cost of a home, there are other costs associated with the transaction. So many buyers are thinking that is a way that they'll help negotiate a better deal, is to get the seller to pay some additional closing costs. It really all comes down to money. How much are you willing to pay for the purchase of this home? The idea of asking a seller to pay some additional closing costs that they're not expecting isn't going to fly under the radar. They're going to see the offer and the amount of money that you're offering and the other costs that you're asking them to pick up. There is what's considered ordinary and customary, and it's usually on a county-by-county basis, although it doesn't vary drastically, as to who pays what fees, whether it's title or escrow for a home warranty. I mean, these are costs that get split and are usually defined initially when a buyer creates an offer, because that offer is ultimately going to become a contract. Should a seller sign it, of course. But it is the complete document that becomes the contract. By asking a seller to pay, let's say, all of an escrow fee, if in a county where escrow fees are split, that's going to be apparent that you're simply pushing that cost onto them. So while I would recommend talking to your broker about how to write the right offer, how to write the best offer to get the best price and terms for you on a property, these things, from my perspective, are pretty transparent. That when someone submits an offer with a client of mine, a seller, paying fees that are not typical, that it's simply a way to reduce the net. And in the end, I'm going to create a net sheet for my sellers so that they know how much money that they're going to get. And whether they take it out of a cost or the price itself is immaterial. It's not something that we're unaware of or haven't seen before. So the idea of having a seller, as a buyer, asking the seller to pick up extra costs is not really going to change the negotiation. In fact, it feels to me, it's an indication to me of a less experienced either buyer or agent to write it that way. Ultimately, it's the net that matters. So having the net dollar amount is what's going to matter to the buyer. When I write offers, I typically go with what is traditional in terms of how closing costs are split and focus on the dollar amount. Sellers don't always know what their home is worth. If there's a lot of activity and they have 7 offers, well, they're going to know that yours is or is not competitive, regardless of the split of closing costs. If you're the only offer, the truth is they don't really know exactly. They know what they want. They know what they think it's worth. But focusing on price is a more genuine approach to it. Now, separate from that, there are costs that don't appear for either seller or buyer in the contract itself. When you write an offer on a property, it doesn't include any costs for your lender, and those are typically the most significant costs, whether it's the appraisal or mortgage insurance or loan fees. None of that appears in the contract. None of that is something that the seller is going to pay. Those are things that buyers pay. And the only way to get a seller to cover those costs is to ask for a seller credit. And that's not uncommon. If you need help covering cost in order to be able to get a loan, the amount of cash that you have to work with, you can ask the seller for credits that will help cover these other fees, but those are typically not included in the contract. Those are not typically a point of negotiation. The borrower or buyer pays loan and lender related fees, and the seller typically pays commissions. and those don't typically appear. Those are things that simply are not involved or not part of the contract itself. In most instances, the seller knows that you're simply negotiating either to arrange for a successful sale by asking for seller credits because you have cash requirements, or that you're simply trying to take money out of the price. And from my perspective, I think I would simply stick with ordinary and customary and focus on price as your point of negotiation. For me, it is a much more direct and genuine approach to a negotiation.